and we speak with journalist and researcher at the Media Review Network, Mariam Jooma. Mariam, I'm not too sure how to pronounce that surname, but perhaps you can pronounce it for me. Assalamu alaikum, Juma Mubarak to you, and welcome.
Walaikum salam, Uncle Inayat. Alhamdulillah, thank you for having me. It's Çarıkçı. So think of curry khichdi.
Okay, no, I wouldn't want to call you Karikitri, believe me. But welcome to the show. Alhamdulillah, Juma Mubarak to you as well, and wonderful having you with us. Now, Mariam, just before we get to the whole issue surrounding this resource power shift, and just looking at the Sahel region, looking at Burkina Faso, we knew at some point in time Ibrahim Traore would come under pressure.
Yes, for sure. Uncle Inayat, look, he's had allegedly 19 assassination attempts on his life since he's taken power. And that's just been in a short space since 2022. So essentially, I mean, there are forces that are anti-revolutionary. And in terms of who the usual suspects are, we know that they obviously include the former colonial power France, but there are also others, those that are entrenched in the previous regime, elites and those who have access to the economic networks in Burkina Faso that would not want to, give up their power, and especially within the mining sector. So yes, the young Ibrahim Traore really has his work cut out for him.
Yes, and also I think strategically, when one looks at Ibrahim Traore and what he has actually achieved to date in Burkina Faso, but also more importantly, one needs to look at Africa. One needs to look at that part of the world in particular, with regards to resources. The power shift in resources that we are going to be talking about, and also strategically how these governments are actually placed. And we know Burkina Faso is resource rich, Mariam.
Definitely. Look, Burkina Faso has, incredible gold reserves. And one of the interesting things is that it's surpassed, many of the other traditional gold producers to be the fourth largest gold producer on the continent. The gold is there. What Ibrahim Traore is now trying to do, and this is where we as South Africa get to maybe look at lessons learned from our own history as a gold producer, is to what extent is the refinery and the production in your own hands. And this is, I think, where the emphasis now is lying from the government in Ouagadougou, is that they want to actually indigenize the processing of that gold. And so what the government has done now is to create a national bank that will actually be in charge of establishing these processing plants, and it has nationalized the mines. So essentially, it's out with foreign-owned companies, and Burkina Faso nationals and indigenous people are now going to be, theoretically at least, in charge of their own mining.
Mariam, let's just unpack some of the detail behind this new mining nationalization strategy of Ibrahim Traore in Burkina Faso.
Look, so what they've done is create what is called, I'm just going to read it here, the Société de Participation Minière de Burkina, so SOPAMIB, which is a state-owned mining company. And what it's done is to take over the assets of the already existing mining companies. So very big ones, two of them, Bungo and Wanion mines. And what they are going to, as I said, is to look at how to increase the capacity for processing and the finished products. Essentially, I think what's important here is to look at how does this link up with transportation and export networks. So this is where I think, Uncle Inayat, where the conflict is definitely going to come. And it's between fine, you have the power to extract the minerals, you have the power to process them, but how do you then get them to the market? And so the neighboring countries surrounding Burkina Faso, because it is a landlocked country, are going to be key to the economic strategy. So you have to have the buy-in from the regional players. And so far, it's been mixed. We've got Cote d'Ivoire and we've got Benin, for example, both who are highly, historically very strongly aligned to France, and who are members of ECOWAS. And ECOWAS has shown that it's actually quite hostile to this new alliance between Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali. So you can, there's a possibility of increasing, of exacerbating regional conflicts due to, what's happening locally in Burkina Faso. So to answer your question, it's, there's the domestic policy, but then there's also the regional implication. And that's where I think the government of Burkina really needs to, tread quite carefully, because you don't want to alienate your neighbors who will essentially be a key part of the economic program.
Yes, but also, Mariam, at the same time, I think what is important is to understand how this could impact and is likely to revolutionize resource management by countries in Africa. Because if Burkina Faso succeeds, and we hope they do, and this obviously could set a precedent for how many other African countries would actually manage their resources.
No, certainly. As I've said at the outset, even for South Africa, we were having these debates around nationalization since the dawn of democracy, and yet somehow, substantively, nothing has come through to actually benefiting the ordinary people. So, there's, like I said, there's economic policy on the one hand, but there also has to be political will from the side of the administration who has to implement it. So you can have all the best laws, but if there's resistance to implementation, that's where you're going to fall short. And looking at Burkina Faso, we see some significant steps in terms of cutting the ministers' salaries, increasing civil servant salaries. So it's basically saying, we're giving money back to those who are actually working and implementing the government's policies. And another interesting point is looking at agriculture. So minerals on one hand, but we don't want to only become, a single exporter. So there's the other issue of, at the same time, making your agriculture, sustainable enough that you're not going to have to rely on the exportation of your minerals for, to feed the nation. And that's a good balance to have. Again, we've seen, tomato processing plants going up in Burkina Faso, and lots of other moves where they've invested significantly in agriculture. So yeah, South Africa, I mean, we of course have a long history of agricultural activity, and the economy is quite intertwined in that in terms of its export products. But we need to look at how it is that the indigenization of each of these sectors can actually be implemented beyond just the policy level. And at the moment, the jury's out on that.
Well, Mariam, we're going to put you on hold. We're going for a quick air break. We'll be back.
This is Salam Media.
It's a wonder how kids get anything done these days. With all the distractions, when do they even get time to study? As a mother, all I can really do is make sure they have all they need to perform at their best. That's why I choose to include Sunfoil, triple refined pure sunflower oil with every meal I make. Naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether I'm cooking, frying or baking, I know every dish will be a wholesome one. Sunfoil, now we're cooking.
They say breakfast is the most important meal of the day, yet many children go to school hungry because of poverty. Penny Appeal South Africa's Breakfast Club aims to get a warm, hearty meal to underprivileged children so they can spend their day prospering in their schoolwork. Help feed a needy learner for only 5 Rand a day or 150 Rand a month. Or visit our website www.pennyappeal.org.za or call 031 1100 573 to find out how you can donate. Penny Appeal South Africa. Small change, big difference.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042 203 1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
Abu Huraira narrated that he heard the Prophet Muhammad, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, say, "In black seed there is a healing for every disease except death." Experience the health benefits of this ancient blessed seed by using the Tib Black Seed range. Black seed assists the body to boost immunity, regulate blood sugar levels, reduce inflammation, and act as a potent antioxidant. Experience a holistic approach to health by introducing the Tib Black Seed range into your routine. Available in capsules, pure cold-pressed oil, and a vapor rub. Trust Tib Health Sciences for quality black seed products. For more information, visit blackseed.co.za. Available at leading pharmacies.
Valley's Motor Spares. We supply motor spares and accessories for all makes and models of motor cars, LDVs, buckies, trucks, and earth-moving equipment. We deliver on time, every time. Please contact us via WhatsApp on 014-592-0925 or call 014-592-0925 or visit 28 Zenderling Street, Rustenburg. Remember the name, Valley's Motor Spares.
Connect and stay ahead with Salam Media. This is Salam Media, coming to you live from South Africa.
Well, we continue our discussion this morning on Burkina Faso, and we're talking about resource power shift, and also in terms of the country seizing control of industrial mines and gold in particular, as we speak with journalist and researcher at the Media Review Network, Mariam Jooma. Mariam, just looking at some of these political considerations. Now, we know that Burkina Faso and Ibrahim Traore have cut ties with the likes of France, with the like of the West as well, the Western allies, for want of a better term, but also in terms of how skeptical they've been about Western economic models. And they seem to be more receptive to other partnerships, for example, closer relations with a country like Russia. And we know with BRICS gaining traction, BRICS gaining momentum as well. And just looking at, how this is likely to play out from, and we mentioned that there have been numerous attempts on Ibrahim Traore's life, and we know where this is actually coming from. But again, looking at this nationalization of mines and how this is actually likely to impact on the geopolitics and also in terms of the global political dynamics that play out on the African continent.
Certainly. Look, Uncle Enite, although Ibrahim Traore is a trailblazer, he's actually not the first one on the continent to try something like this. So look at historically, even within his own country, and many have said that he's actually modeled himself on the example of Thomas Sankara, who actually had exactly the same anti-imperialist, anti-colonial view to not just legal sovereignty, but economic sovereignty. So what happens, what happened to Thomas Sankara? He was assassinated. What happened to Patrice Lumumba? He was assassinated. Looking at our own context, we could perhaps argue that those who were more vociferous in their economic, the push for economic liberation were also, made to be redundant within the transitional government that we have had in South Africa. So, yes, he's going to definitely come up against the might of, interests, Western countries, and as we've said, the elites. But then on the other hand, as you've now suggested, to what extent can we expect more from the alternatives, from the BRICS countries? And I think this is where we need to be extremely cautious. The BRICS have offered, a lot in terms of posturing as Western, anti-Western allies, but we have to look at the details. And as they always say, the devil is in the details. And looking just at the example of Gaza and Palestine, we see that actually every single BRICS country has still been trading with Israel. And in fact, many of them have substantially increased their trade with Israel. So I would say, Ibrahim Traore needs to be extremely cautious as to what kind of partnerships he leverages with the alternative bloc, BRICS, for it to truly allow him the freedom that, of course, I think he is what is behind his vision for a liberated Burkina Faso and essentially for a liberated Africa. And here I think is where middle powers like the UAE and Qatar and Turkey have an interesting role to play, because they essentially have another kind of alternative to offer. And we need to see whether or not those partnerships could bring in the substantive change. But as we know, the UAE are fully aligned with the Western imperial objective. But Turkey and Qatar, I think, might offer an alternative. And although it's underreported, there is quite considerable connection between the Turkish government and Burkina, and it may offer a buffer between the African country and its Western former colonial power and the Eastern Bloc that might be seeking to exploit it as well.
Yes, but also I think you mentioned some of the names, and also when one looks at Muammar Gaddafi as well, who tried to revolutionize Africa, the African continent, and spoke about an African currency as well. And one also needs to take into account what is playing out globally, particularly the United States of America becoming a lot more isolated as well. And we know that there are many political analysts, economists that are also predicting the downfall of the United States of America and imploding from actually within the United States of America, considering their policies and looking at Trump and looking at all these orders and tariffs and all of that playing out. And it's actually going to be quite interesting to see, what pans out at the end of the day. But it is also clear that Africa will be playing a pivotal role, and Africa will be in the limelight, because we know for a long, long time there has been the scramble for African resources right across the world, whether we're looking at the BRICS countries, whether we're looking at Western Europe, whether we're looking at the United States of America.
No, indeed. And I think if anything, because as we've said, the dust has not settled, we have to also remember, and it's very important not to forget to highlight this point, is that, Ibrahim Traore came to power through a military coup. So what are the democratic credentials that he's going to be able to bring, after or as he's implementing his economic changes? And I think that's where the discussion tends to now be a bit fuzzy. And of course, the West would like to, highlight that aspect more, to say that, he is not actually a Democrat. And interestingly enough, I think we almost ripe in terms of, civilizational discourse to ask the question, what is democracy, and to what extent can economic sovereignty by itself deliver the dividends of democracy, because we've lived with, legal or theoretical democracy without the full benefit of economic liberation. So what happens if you go to the other side? If you accede to, for example, a military government, but then you have, your basic needs and services are seen to. And so these are the debates, I think, if anything, we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater to say, oh, one is wrong and one is right. It's actually, I think, a matter now of looking at the various historical examples and learning from those lessons learned to create almost a new kind of political vision where, as you've said, there's no longer the hegemon. The US is not, it's not a unipolar world, but we've not yet emerged into a multipolar world. And what role does Africa have to play in all of this? So I think as analysts ourselves, we'll also be very interested to observe what happens next.
And just, I think, finally, Mariam, we've been talking about South Africa and possibly the lessons that South Africa could actually learn from these countries in the Sahel region, from Burkina Faso as well. What sort of lessons could South Africa learn? Because somehow we have this impression, and possibly it is valid, I think, and it is the case as well, where South Africa seems to be sitting on the fence when it comes to its resources, when it comes to its relationships, even with the rest of the world.
So again, Uncle Inat, we go back to the governance system. Of course, as a democracy, we have oversight, we have parliament, we've got a very vociferous media that covers all of this. So, there is, of course, the positive aspect of saying, yes, we want to indigenize our economy from, the West African countries' perspective. But then how do you, what kind of oversight happens after that? And I think this is where South Africa we can learn from almost the incubation period that's happening in West Africa. So we can perhaps look back and say, what have we achieved so far? And to what extent has the privatization or the creep of private companies into public life, where everything is outsourced, to what extent has that eroded our democracy? So it's almost, this is an experimental time. It reminds me of, I think, what the atmosphere might have been like in the 60s with the decolonial movement, when there was so much enthusiasm, and yet at the same time, the obstacles, were clear. But that didn't deter great thinkers, like we've said, Thomas Sankara, Patrice Lumumba, Kwame Nkrumah, to lead the way. And I think in South Africa, perhaps the intellectual, the repository that we've had before is waning, and we need to have a resurgence of thought leadership. Young South Africans, come through and begin to debate these things and think over these things.
Well, Mariam, Jazakallah khairan so much for that and for taking time out this morning with us right here on Salam Media. An absolute pleasure engaging with you on this topic. And I'm sure there's a lot more that we will be engaging on going into the future. But for now, have yourself a wonderful Jummah as well. And Jazakallah once again for your time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Walaikum salam, Jazakallah.
Mariam Jooma, Çarıkçı, joining us this morning, a journalist and researcher at the Media Review Network. And this whole question surrounding Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traore, a topic that is gaining a lot of traction. It's been under discussion, and we've seen it also on many of the social media groups as well, where it actually features very, very prominently. So let's keep an eye out on what is taking part in that part of the world. And with that, we're going to go for a quick break. We come back, we'll be joined by Ruwaida Kotwal from Khidmatul Awam, 2,500 South Africans preparing for the sacred journey of Hajj.